You can do the first 20 puzzles now of Puzzle Rush. How do you get yourself from 20 up to 30? So you can see our puzzle rating is about 1200 currently where we're sat. And we start off with exactly the same way of looking for wins here, looking at checks. So there's 2 checks that I can see, queen to e4 and queen to b1. Queen to e4 is no good because it just gets captured by the queen. Queen to b1, I'll draw your arrows properly. Queen to b1 is a check, and there's no good squares for the king to escape to. You can see that the only squares it's got available to go to are these ones, which get cut off once the queen moves onto almost that diagonal, onto this diagonal. So by checking, it means the king can't move, so the only moves that black has is to block with a rook, which can be taken, and block with the queen, which can be taken, leading to a checkmate after queen b1, taking the rook, because it's just there to sacrifice, and taking the queen with checkmate. Bishop b3. So what checks do we have in the position? Taking the rook there with check has some potential, because after king takes, it's in a back rank situation where it can't come out here, and it can't come out here because of the bishop. So that's a strong candidate we'll likely consider shortly. And queen takes is the other one where it can be recaptured with 4 different pieces. So let's go back again. We'll take the rook with check, king takes, and then the other follow-up check. We've either got bishop there, the king would just take it. Instead, we've got rook a8, check. King can't come forward because of the bishop. The only blocking move they've got is with the rook, which we can then take. So the move is to sacrifice your queen to get your rook to the back and pick up the rook at the end. What checks do we have in this position? The first one that looks almost like mate is queen takes g7, but rook takes, and after pawn takes and king takes, you don't have a solid way of being able to get your pieces in. Even if you go bishop there, would look promising, but the knight can snap it off. So there's some potential to be calculating lines further, but let's go through the other options we have first. Taking the rook there, we'd likely see king taking back. We could take the bishop, but the king takes back, so that transposes into the same line. Queen there just gets taken by the rook with no good follow-up. So the interesting one I want to look at is queen f7, forces the king into the corner. You could then take the bishop, rook will take, pawn will take, king will take. That ends up with a transposition to what we ended up looking at before. Or instead you could take with the pawn there, check. And you might think you'd be able to take back with the rook, but you can't, because once this pawn moves, it unleashes our h-rook. So actually this leads to forced checkmate with a check here. And once I take with the pawn, the rook can't take me back, because you'll see our h-rook. Our h-rook comes alive. So once I lift here, that's going to be checkmate. King over. So we want to first identify the fact that we are going to uncover a check as soon as we move our knight. So we can move our knight to any available square, and that will be check. And there's quite a thematic checkmate of smothering checkmate here. And the most forcing move would be if you were to put your knight to h3, that would be a check both with the knight and with the queen on the king. So that's a double check, which forces the king to move. And then there's quite a famous pattern that you can have with the knight and the queen of this. So you'd start with double check, the king would move across. The next forcing check you'd have would be queen into g1. The king can't take it because that queen is supported by the knight. So the rook is forced to take. And then finally you get the knight going to f2, smothering the king into the corner with a smothered mate. So knight h3, check, queen up to g1 with a check from which the king can't take, the rook has to take, and now the king has boxed itself into the corner, and we're fine to play knight f2, checkmate. Same idea here. The only check we've got available is taking on h7. The king would take back, and it's almost a bit like a back rank, but shifted over to the side of the board. The king can't go here, here, and it can't go here because of the bishop. So therefore, once we take the pawn, we're threatening rook h4 checkmates. So again, this is just another example of checks leading to wins here. Rook over. So let's follow the same principles. We can take the bishop, or we could take the pawn. I don't think the pawn leads to much because you just lose your queen and there's no good follow-up in that line. Taking the bishop is more interesting because after they take back, we've now lined up our rook with the king, so we can get a knight move with a check for free. So if we were to take the bishop, it takes back. We then move our knight out of the way with check. Make a block. So we would pick up the queen, but we'd lose a rook. So I think the end of that result would be that we end up picking up the bishop for the rook and trading off queens. So what else is there? Knight to f6 is interesting with a check. The bishop can't move because it's pinned. So the bishop can't take it. And if the queen takes it, if we take the queen, the bishop takes it. Like there, queen takes. The other move you'd have is rook takes e7 check. The queen goes back there. So the only other check we've got available is taking here with the knight, which is quite interesting, uncovering the rook. You can't take with the bishop. If you take with the queen, it loses to the rook. So you'd likely take back with the pawn, and then you'd be able to infiltrate with either your queen or your rook coming through here. I think the queen is probably most deadly. Forcing you to here, maybe. So perhaps, I think this is the move, right? Knight takes c5, takes back. Maybe you take with the rook. If you go back, if you ever go back, you lose this rook and this rook. There, takes there. Takes with the rook. You come forward. There's no rook there because it just gets taken. Check. They need infiltrate with that rook. So that's the interesting check to look at. Pawn takes, queen takes. What are the available squares? There or there are the only options you have. If you go back, so if we look at that red square, I have takes there, picking up your queen. So that's no good. So there, there, there. You can't go back there, so I think you're forced to come up here. I would check you here. The only move you'd have would be going here. I think you'd have queen round the back. I think there should be a mate there. So I'm happy to go for this. Knight takes c5. We don't get to see the continuation. Okay. What checks have we got here? Bishop takes f2, queen takes f2, no good one after that. Queen takes g3. You might think can't do that because the f pawn, but notice this pin, that f pawn. So that f pawn basically doesn't exist. So anytime there's a pin, it's equivalent to you to basically taking your thumb, putting it over the f2 square as if this doesn't exist. If this pawn didn't exist, this knight is totally free, so we can take it. So let's work out the continuation rather than just thinking there's a free knight. So we take the knight with check, can't be taken back, king has to move over, and then the continuation. We could take the pawn with check, but that's an extra move that we don't need. Instead, we can just go straight up to g2 and checkmate. So we take there. What checks do we have here? The only one I can see with the queen is up to c5, where the bishop takes. Other one is rook takes on e1, where the queen would take. Well, that's interesting because it deflects the queen away from defending f3. So what happens if we take on f3? They don't have the ability to come down to f8 and checkmate us because our knight protects. And we're threatening to go queen g2 with a checkmate. One way of defending against that is to move your queen over. So they'd either go over here, but that would lead to, is that going to lead to some troubles after checks here? Rook takes there, threatening mate and also threatening the bishop. Queen moves over, check there. Check there. This pawn. So you take the rook, queen takes. I think this is the right line. I just got to figure out what happens after this. If queen goes over, we give a check there, king goes there, we pick up that pawn. Yeah. We're taking and we pick up the pawn. Okay, so they go for this line. So there was the option of queen here, there, which they played, queen up, or bishop there. I think were all ways of defending against the checkmate. They also protect their bishop, so we're not picking up a free bishop. But we have check, king there, check. King goes to one of these two squares. We have another check. So we're picking up these two pawns, which I think is all we need to calculate for here. There we go. King moves over. So what checks have we got available here? There, the king simply takes. Other one is bishop out, which looks promising. The only blocking moves are with the pawn, which we can simply take. The only other moves then are for the king to slide over, and we were able to put our rook up to e1 and deliver a checkmate there. So bishop a6 with a check. Yep, they block. We can just take it. King slides over, and now back rank with rook to e1. So we end up with the same as that we get in the first 10 puzzles or so, with just back rank, but you've got to find a couple of moves beforehand before you can force a back rank checkmate. Puzzle number 30. Okay, an end game with limited pieces on the board. So the kind of focus shifts a little bit here. The first thought is, can I capture the knight? There's no easy way I can see immediately to do that. The next question is, can I promote my pawn up the board? So the first thing I want to look at is what happens if every move I just push the pawn. How does black go about stopping me? Well, the simple way of trying to stop you would be there, then the king would go, then there, then the king would go, then there, and the king would go, and you're not quite able to promote it. So you'll need to do something to either deflect the king away, or we'll need to try and win the knight. So one thing is to try and track back with the king, potentially. So there, king goes back. We could go up at that stage. And then the king is unable to go there. So if they want to continue, they'd have to go there. We'd go there, 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 and we're able to queen. So this now looks promising, that we can push, and the king can't get round to defend it. The other question is, can they bring their knight to a square that they're able to defend it? Because even though we're up a pawn, if white is able to take this pawn with their knight, even if we take it back and we've got a king and a bishop, that's insufficient material to checkmate. So we need to stop the knight from taking the pawn. We need to shield it all the way through to the end. So we'd push the pawn. Is there a way for the knight to move? It doesn't have access to these squares, which I think it will need. So it will likely need the king to move there. We already said we'd move our king forward. Then perhaps they put their knight there. We would push. And then there's no really good forward squares, because either of these two squares we're able to take it with our bishop. So I think we push. I don't think the knight can get to us either. Push with our king. Okay, so the knight's going to g3. Like I say, you might be thinking, oh, they're attacking our bishop. Let's try and defend our pawn. But no, the only thing we need to be careful that it never gets taken is this h5 pawn. It doesn't matter if they take our bishop. So h6, they'll take our bishop, fine. Push on to h7, and then there's no good way for them to stop us from queening. So we're able to just push forward with h6. Take the bishop, fine. Let's push the pawn forward again because it's being threatened. And did it. Amazing. That's the first 30 puzzles of Puzzle Rush complete.